Welcome to About Photography, the podcast, coming to you direct from New York City. And now, here's your host, Ed Ferrosky.
In this episode, we're pleased to bring you an interview with fine art photographer Elinor Carucci. Plus, we explore pinhole and other alternative photography with Joseph Ferreira. Make sure you look for the links and photos related to this episode on the podcast notes at aboutphotographypodcast.com. I'm so happy to have Elinor Carucci on the show today. Elinor is a photographer who lives in New York City. She's best known for her award-winning work that features, among other things, intimate portraits of herself and her family. Her work has been featured in many solo and group exhibitions, and her photographs are included in public collections at the Museum of Modern Art, Brooklyn Museum of Art's International Center of Photography, the Jewish Museum, and the Houston Museum of Fine Arts. She's a recipient of numerous awards, including the ICP Infinity Award and a Guggenheim Fellowship. Elinor, I'm honored to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's an honor to be on the show.
You started taking pictures of your family as a teenager. I want to know, when did you become aware that you were doing more than just making snapshots?
I think it took a while because I started taking pictures and I was 15 and I took pictures of the family. Then I did 2 years of the Israeli army service. Mm-hmm. When I went to art school, to Bezalel Academy of Art to do my undergrad degree, I stopped doing those pictures because I thought they're not, serious art, and now I have to do serious work. So I think it was with the help of one of my professors who remembered what I showed in order to get into school, to get accepted. And he told me, you're looking for every excuse to photograph your family. Why don't you just go back to photographing them? You can talk about all the things you're unsuccessfully trying to talk about, doing forced kind of work with photographing your family. You can talk about universal themes through that. And so he kind of gave me the legitimacy to go back to it and to understand that this is my work. It's okay. It's good enough.
Right. So his advice was basically photograph what you know.
Photograph how you know, and what you intuitively started doing, it's fine. You don't have to use 8 lights in a studio with an 8x10 camera for it to be good, to be meaningful. It's okay to snap an image of your mother as she wakes up from an afternoon nap. You can talk about a lot of things through that.
I'm curious, in photographs featuring yourself, you're using a self-timer, correct?
Right.
Are there any other technical details that you'd like to share about, especially some of the earlier images, how these were done? You mentioned lights.
Yes, I think, things changed a lot since I moved in 95 from Israel to New York, because I used to, in Israel, use a lot of available light and window light. Israel is flooded with light, and there are windows everywhere in all the apartments, and some strobes. When I moved here, I use mostly strobes or tungsten light, and some very little available light. So it changed. It changed, and recently I've been shooting more outside, but those images haven't been shown yet.
What type of camera do you use?
Now I use the Canon Mark III. Before that, I used film, and I used to shoot mainly with Nikon 35mm and some 4x5.
Okay. What was your favorite film?
When I shot film, it was Fuji Reala.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Love the skin tones of this film.
Right. When you're making a photograph, are you anticipating how it's going to be received by others, or is that far from your thoughts at the time?
It is far. I mean, more and more I have to work on making it far, making the separation. I don't want to think about what other people will think when they look at my work. So it was very natural to me at first to just take pictures because I want to take them. And then later on, I became more aware of what people say and criticism, but I still make the separation between showing the work and making the work. Is
it a struggle to make that separation? I mean, that's one of the, I think they tell artists you don't want to concern yourself with what, it's almost like self-editing, like editing before the fact. Right. Right.
And I think because I know I can edit my work, because when I'm editing the work and looking at the work, then I let myself, and I have to think about, especially in the recent years, photographing my children, what and how images are going to be received, and if I want to still include them, or if in spite of what people think I want. So those are all very conscious decisions. Mm-hmm. But when I'm taking the pictures, then, well, sometimes it's a struggle, but most of the time I have to say it does just happen that I take the pictures and I don't think about anything else.
The photographs of your family are obviously very intimate, and I think that's the word that people use most often to describe your work. Do you feel that your family has granted you like a special kind of access, a special kind of permission that maybe other artists or anyone living in a family might get?
Yeah, I do feel that way, and not the entire family. That's why some people in my family, more extended family, you don't see in the work. Mm-hmm. But I do feel that my mother was unusually open and trusting, and even enjoying the process of taking the pictures, making them together, looking at them and sharing some of the moments in our lives with other people. And I was fortunate in that way. And my husband, I mean, when I met him, I don't want to say, it will be horrible to say that I married him for that, but he came from a family of photographers, and he's very, very open, and he never set a limit to me. Mm-hmm. So it was part of what I fell in love with, when I met him, not just thinking about my work, just this kind of person that's open and accepts me as I am.
I think maybe for many artists, it takes a good partner to sort of leave those doors open and not, I guess, constrain you from what you love to do.
Right. No, he's unusual, and I'm lucky to have him not only allowing me to photograph our lives, but helping me. He's sometimes the one who press the button when I'm taking pictures, and he helps me with lights and editing and many aspects of my work.
Do you feel that your life at this point has become an open book? I mean, are you? Is that a conscious thought of yours? And is there a limit to what you would reveal?
Yeah, no, there is a limit. Not that I'm defying the limit, but there is a limit. Even just because I don't always photograph, I don't carry the camera with me everywhere. There are certain things and certain information that's not being recorded. So I don't feel like my life is an open book. I feel that I share very valuable moments to me with others, but it's not my whole life. Right.
So you do keep things for yourself.
Again, it's not like I feel I'm not going to photograph these elements in my life, but the nature of photography, it's not a 24/7 thing, is that some moments and some parts, and there are periods of time when I'm not taking pictures, so just not everything is there.
If you'll give me a simple phrase that might sum up each of these collections, crisis.
It's hard to give a simple phrase. If I could give one, I wouldn't be a photographer.
Yeah.
But I think looking back at Crisis, which was a difficult time where my marriage almost fell apart, I really see photography as part of why we were able to stay together, me and my husband, and how we could somehow still communicate through those pictures.
And it probably helped the fact that he himself communicated with pictures, that he comes from that background too.
Right, and we both went to an art school and studied photography, and he became a web programmer, but he takes pictures. Yeah. He still takes pictures more than me, I think.
Yeah. Okay, pain.
Pain, it's a very desperate time. And then loneliness, a time of loneliness when it was at times I was at home, it was only me and the camera.
Mm. This was a back injury?
It was back pain that was resolved finally after 22 bad months and many doctors by Dr. Sarno's books.
Okay. Closer for me sometimes feels like a more innocent time because I'm younger, and it's a lot I think about my mom, a lot about my parents, and my life in my 20s, very, very, very early 30s, but innocent, I would say. And quickly, have your parents ever had the chance to visit you? here? Have they made the trip?
Yeah, my mom spends about 2 months of the year here with me and my kids.
Okay. How does she like New York?
She loves New York. She really loves New York.
Okay, now back to the collections. Here's the last one. Diary of a Dancer.
This feels more like a little journey than the others, and my way of getting to know a little bit of America. It's less about my life, and it's more about my journey as a dancer and the different communities I dance to and what I've seen.
I read the intro to the book, and I know that you had help with that, which, you know, a lot of visual people need a little help with words sometimes. But the story is yours, and it's very inspiring, and it's I think a lot of us could relate to it. When and why did you decide to start dancing professionally?
I hope it's not too long of a story. But I went to a high school of arts. I was a musician. I played the piano for 13 years, but there was also the dance program in the school. And I was very jealous of the dancers, but could never think about becoming a dancer myself.
Why were you jealous?
I just loved the freedom. It felt like they were flying with their bodies. But I felt like the musician... I couldn't do the switch. You know how in high school you feel you're being defined in a certain kind of definition, and you can't change it until you finish high school,
yeah.
Out of school. And then I danced I started working as a bartender, but very quickly became a nightclub dancer. So I was dancing in those cages and on the bars, and
like a go-go dancer.
Right, exactly. I did it for a while and then decided to start learning belly dance, which is pretty popular in Israel. And I've learned it for a few years and then joined Arabesque. It's a dance company. And then when I came here, part of it, I love belly dancing, but part of it was like, how do I make a living? And for the first 8 years in New York, my main income was from belly dancing.
Now in the book, you talk about this craving for attention and connection with total strangers, and this feeling of separation and loneliness after a performance. And I can't quite put my finger on it, but it would seem that some of this somehow figures into your photography.
Oh, completely. I think my need to communicate with people, I want people to relate to me, and I want to relate to them. I want to open up to them, and I want them to open up to me. So it's a kind of, I call it an intimacy addiction, but it is a part of, even though it was done in different ways, of my dance. Because I remember the other belly dancers that I danced with, they loved the stage when it's like more upscale, and I didn't like the stage. I actually enjoyed dancing in people's living room, surrounded by people where I could even feel them or give them a hand or hold a baby. And I feel with my photography, it's the same thing. I want to connect to the people I love even more through my work. And then I want to connect to people I don't know through showing the work.
Do you think that at the time when you came over from Israel, was it a lonelier time for you because maybe you didn't know so many people here?
It was the loneliest time ever. My God, it was so hard. I mean, I came by myself because Iran couldn't come with me. Mm-hmm. I was here for 4 months from a school that no one could even pronounce the name of the school in Jerusalem, with a box of prints. My English was not great, and it was really hard. But even when my husband joined me and we moved here and rented a studio in Chelsea, it took me a few years to start feeling at home.
So maybe that's part of what drew you to that dancing, and that, you know, maybe that filled in a little bit of the gap for a while.
Oh my God, you really get the work, Ed, because a lot of what I loved in Israel, you go to a lot of family events and bar mitzvahs and weddings and Friday evening. It's a big part of your life, and suddenly here I had none of this. So being hired to come and dance in bar mitzvahs and weddings and anniversaries, or just even little family events, It was really filling me with feelings of warmth and family. And I think that it is one of the reasons why I was so drawn to belly dancing.
Let's talk about your commercial work, editorial specifically. Who do you shoot for?
I shoot for different magazines. I shoot a lot from the New Yorker. I shoot for Real Simple magazine, New York magazine, sometimes the New York Times, and occasionally Time, and different magazines that come and go. How
does this work differ from your personal work? In other words, how do you approach it differently?
I don't approach it differently. It's just that the situation is different. So I bring the whole of myself. I want my work I want to, touch people with my photography. I want to connect to people and see who they are with my camera. It's just that the situation is, I don't know if to call it limited because it feels kind of negative, but it is more limited in time and in knowing the people. I'm not going to try to photograph who they are in the most deep sense of the word, but I do want to get a glimpse into who they are, as little as I know them. So I feel that from that, in that way, I do approach it the same. I'm looking for a connection, for something very personal. But the situation is different, and I have like a boss. I need to make images that will also be good for the magazine, and I have to think about all that. Those people usually don't know me, and I have a limited amount of time with them. But I think the good thing about it for me is that I feel like I'm always somehow going to school and getting homework. I work with great photo editors, and they're inspiring. They're sending me to different directions, giving me different assignments, and I have to stretch my knowledge and my flexibility and my ability to work in different situations with different people. And I think it really allowed me to grow technically and conceptually with my own work.
The editorial work still has the Elinor Carucci signature to it. I mean, for example, I was looking at your cat power images, and you could tell it was your work.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It means a lot to hear it.
I was curious as to how that unfolded. How much time did you have with her? And if you could just quickly relate how that shoot unfolded.
I think, actually, I didn't have a lot of time because she had to catch a flight. She came in a little late, and I had about 2 hours, which is very little for a cover story with 10 pages, I think it was. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have a lot of time, but I had someone, a personality that was willing to... She's a performer, she's an artist, and she opened up to me, and she gave not herself to me, but a little part of herself. She really opened up. So that doesn't always happen. She wasn't afraid, she wasn't suspicious. She was who she is, and I did connect to her. I love her music, and she was inspiring and dramatic and intense person. So it just worked that I got something from her. So I was able to work and create interesting images, I hope. Sometimes I don't get it from people, and I never push for it too much because there is nothing to push. So when it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. And those images are probably not on my website because I feel, I did the job, I made a decent image, the magazine is okay, but nothing unusual happened.
Right. Is it frustrating when that happens?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. Because, you will leave home in the morning going to work and hoping for something extraordinary to happen. But it happens. And I would rather respect a person's wish or privacy or personality. So if I feel at the end of the day that I respected someone's limit and I did work that's not so interesting, then I'm fine. I mean, it's what it is.
Right. Looking back at your personal work, what photographs did you not take that you wish you had?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, millions of moments, millions of things and situations that I don't even pull out my camera. But somehow I feel that there are some images I didn't take, but they live through images that I did take. But a lot of memories and times that weren't taken. But I don't know if I regret not taking them because, you can't burn out yourself or the people around you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like I regret not taking them. I just wish they were captured somehow.
Are there any photographs that you regret having released to the public?
No.
Regret doesn't help, does it?
Yeah, I'm not a very regretting person, I have to say. I just, usually I feel I was fortunate in, there are many things that missed opportunities, missed images, but it's just life, you know.
Yeah. I know the story goes that your parents have sort of this veto power, or at least at a time that they did.
All of the people that I photograph they can see the work and veto any image they want.
Have you ever snuck something in and then later, or maybe somebody didn't remember that they okayed a picture and then they said, how did that get in the book? Or something like that.
No. I would not do it. I can't. I mean, it would make me feel so bad. So just the guilt of it would kill me. I wouldn't even go there.
I imagine, I know we were talking before about how you try not to allow yourself to self-edit or to think about the purpose of the photos or how they'll end up eventually when you're taking them. So I imagine that you don't shoot with an actual theme or project in mind. I mean, in terms of your lifelong body of work, as parts of your life unfold, you don't sit there and say, oh, I'm going to come up with a theme and then shoot my pictures around that theme. You probably discover this after the fact.
Yes and no. I mean, yes, I don't work in projects because I do follow my life. So I happen to get pregnant and conceive twins. So this is what I'm doing right now. But I do have then themes or some concepts or messages that I am trying to not like literally put into my work, but I'm trying to be aware of. So I remember becoming a mother and feeling the conflicted emotions that motherhood was for me. I was like, wow, this is something so intense. 1 minute I'm happy and 1 minute I'm angry and I'm tired, but I'm so excited, everything at once. I was like, how can I bring it into my images? And not that I really know how and follow it, but there's certain themes, especially about the recent body of work, about motherhood, things that I wanted to say, and I try to make sure that they are in the work somehow. I know that if I try to illustrate them into the work, I will fail with bad images, and when I try it, it comes across too forced. But I'm trying to keep it in the back of my mind and trust my work that it will come through.
Do you ever find yourself challenged or frustrated by not being able to capture or express something with your camera?
That's the nature of my life. All the time I take bad images that didn't work, that I feel are mediocre, or I try to do something and either technically or conceptually or emotionally it doesn't go through, and I try again, and then something else happened that might be wonderful, but it's always like looking and failing and succeeding and finding something you didn't even look for. It's a very elusive kind of process.
Oh, so true. How often do you photograph these days?
I tend to either photograph every day for a while and then maybe not photograph for 2-3 weeks. And then sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I haven't photographed for 3 weeks. I force myself and take the camera, and then I get back into shape. I call it my photographic shape.
Oh, okay. Well, that's nice to know. I'm not the only one. You hear other photographers, I guess, boasting about, I take pictures every day.
No. I think I teach, so it's something that maybe some people don't share, but we all get lazy, or then you feel when you stop taking pictures, you suddenly stop seeing. And you have to bring yourself back to seeing more of what's around you. So I think it's everybody, and who is not admitting it is just lying. But maybe I'm wrong. No,
I think you're right. Let's hope you're right. What do you hope people get from viewing your work ultimately?
I think hope that they will accept themselves more. And I know it's a part of my personality. I always want to share my weaknesses, my flaws, my facial hair, the little, like, the stretch marks, not only in my work. And I want people to do the same to me. I think it's comforting. And when you see someone's lives and the good and the bad of it, it kind of it reassures you, and it gives you the license to be yourself. Mm-hmm. So I hope for that.
Again, it seems that theme of just wanting that human connection, that, and it's almost like you're saying, here's me, now where's you? Let me see you, Right.
Not that I really want people to show themselves to me, but and I do get emails from people, even if I just touch them in a very, like, emotional way, mm-hmm. And let them feel that some elements in their lives are okay or beautiful or acceptable, then I feel I succeeded.
I think you've definitely succeeded. I think you've touched a lot of people with your work. Elinor, thank you for being on the show today.
No, thank you so much, Ed. It was a pleasure. Thanks.
You're listening to About Photography with Ed Verosky.
Joseph Ferreira calls himself a minimalist photographer. He's based in Rock Hill, South Carolina, just south of Charlotte. He has a love for landscapes, architecture, and fine art photography. He recently wrote about his process for making pinhole photographs with standard 35mm film and digital cameras, and you can find that article in our blog. Thanks for joining us today, Joseph.
Thanks for having me on.
Hey, Joseph, what exactly is a minimalist photographer?
Well, it's sort of a name I gave myself for a couple of reasons. Minimalist photography is actually a style of photography that doesn't let the photograph be cluttered. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to kind of call myself a minimalist because I wanted to use what I had around me without going out and buying the latest and greatest.
In terms of gear?
Yeah, in terms of gear, kind of thinking outside the box. So I take, my 30D and I go out and shoot when a lot of people are out with a 5D Mark II and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. And how does this apply to lighting? What's your philosophy on lighting where this is concerned?
I try to use as much light as I can naturally, but I've gotten into actually using a flash. And it's scary because, when you're first using a flash, you don't know what you're doing, and then you try to go out and use it, and you're like, oh, man, I don't know how to use this. But then eventually it gets a little bit easier, but I've started picking up on the flash a little bit more.
I guess you're most drawn to the idea of, okay, a guy who's got a basic camera should be able to take a decent picture, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't happen overnight. I'm constantly learning. I don't know it all, I've been shooting, kind of since 1999. Started out with a Canon AE1 and was shooting 35mm. I did that in college, and then, film was expensive, so I wasn't doing it the whole time. Once I got my digital camera, I started shooting a lot more. And I think that was the beginning of really learning photography.
Do you think the reason for that might be that once you had digital in your hands, just made learning a lot easier about certain aspects of photography than, say, when you were shooting film?
It's very easy to learn from your mistakes with digital.
Yeah. Well, with that instant feedback, right?
Yes, you can see, oh, shoot, I need to reshoot that one again.
Yeah.
And absolutely. And I think it helped me to be a little bit more creative.
The AE1 is one of the most sought-after cameras right now. And isn't it funny that with all the digital technology available that photographers are still drawn to, film, and especially an older camera like that.
Yeah, they're all over eBay. I mean, you can see them. People are selling them, and people are buying them.
One thing that I mentioned in the intro is that you wrote a little article for us about pinhole photography.
Yes.
How did you get into pinhole photography?
Well, I'm constantly learning. So, as I go along and listen to different podcasts and I look stuff up on the internet. I kind of get these things in my mind of like, oh, I'd love to do that. I have a box sitting here. It's a black box, and it's actually meant for holding photographs. Mm-hmm. And eventually, I'd like to take 4x5 film and use this box to make a pinhole camera. But that kind of takes time, a little bit of money. And then I started, my brain started working, and I'm like, well, what if I can take a black piece of paper and shove it up against the camera and stick a pinhole in it? Yeah. And so I tried it, and it worked. It wasn't great because I didn't realize that the smaller the hole, the clearer the picture. So I kept making the hole bigger. Wow. And it was like, it keeps getting fuzzier and fuzzier. And finally I retaped it and stuck another hole in it, and it worked. But I was like, man, I don't like having to tape this up on the camera. So I was like, wait a minute, I've got a body cap. And so I'm not the original person who thought this up because other people have done it.
I thought it was your invention. What are we talking about?
No. I looked on the internet, and sure enough, somebody else had done it.
Yeah, I'd seen different versions of this. It's just that yours it seemed just like, okay, here's the easy, there wasn't a lot of diagrams involved or measurements. It was just a
trial and error.
Yeah.
And so, I was like, okay, what should I use? And, I work with, for the phone company, so I always have black electrical tape. Mm-hmm. And, when you have light that shines into your camera, you want most of it to be black. And so black electrical tape was only, the logical thing to use. And I was like, well, what else am I going to use? And I thought of, large grade foil, because you don't want it to rip. You want to be able to stick a hole in it, and then you can actually go back and kind of close up the hole with your finger a little bit to make it a little bit better. And, I tried it with just doing the black tape all the way across it, but what the tape does is it's elastic. And so what it wants to do is it wants to cover that hole back up again. Right. So I had to, tape the four corners, and then I started shooting with it, and I'm like, man, this is great. And those body caps are cheap. You can go on eBay, and I got 5 of them for $1 a piece with free shipping. Wow. And so I ordered 5 of them. And a friend of mine who shoots with me, he ordered a couple also. And so, we started, shooting some pinhole photography. And then I bought a Canon Elan 2 35 millimeter camera because I like my AE1, but it's really not practical for what I want to do in comparison to my digital camera.
Right. Now just to be clear, the first version of this contraption that you made for your camera, was that for the digital, or did you just use this on your film camera?
I did it straight with the digital.
Okay. So the digital was the first attempt at this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and most of my photographs are with the digital camera.
Right.
And the great thing about the digital and the 35 millimeter is that I can reproduce what I like with the digital and then transfer the same information back over to the 35 millimeter. And so I'm not wasting shots with the film.
Oh, okay. So in other words, kind of like a test shot.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll look at it and go, yeah, it's too dark. Oh, it's too light. And oh, perfect. And so I take the same information, the time and the ISO, and then I take my shot. And you have to use a tripod. You can do it without a tripod, but you got to hold it really still. Yeah. But in sunlight conditions, you can use it without a tripod. But most conditions, you want to have a tripod just to keep the blur to a minimum.
Well, what kind of shutter speeds are we talking about?
I want to say 15th of a second to a 30th of a second, and that's in direct sunlight. And that's at 400 ISO.
Okay, that's not too bad.
The film that I'm using is 400, and I wish Walgreens or Walmart or any of those still carried like the 125 ISO film, but they don't. Right. But the 400 at about, a 30th of a second, you can hold the camera without, too much blur. So that's the speeds we're looking at.
Well, I think your pinhole images are fascinating, and why do people like imagery like that? I think it's a nostalgia. I think that especially, people who are like me, in their 40s, maybe I should edit that part out. I don't know. Not want to share that with the audience, but, we remember what film looks like, and we remember the flaws of film and the grain and things like that. And so there is that nostalgia, and that's probably, I guess this is closely related to, all the younger shooters these days are, that are into lomography, right?
Yes, absolutely. The thing about lomography is that I've told people this, that our engineers spend millions of dollars and thousands of hours to remove all the flaws, just to have a programmer go and create something that will put all those flaws back in. If you look at some of my pinholes, you'll see some duplicate shots. When I shoot pinhole with a DSLR, I shoot in RAW. And so the RAW file keeps all that data. I will take and print out a color version, and then I'll turn it into a black and white or a sepia tone. Just kind of give it that rustic look. But we have programs now that do that automatically. One of the programs is the Instagram. You can get it for the iPad, the iPod, the iPhone, and you can take your photos from your device and put it into the Instagram. And there's about 15 different settings you can choose from to give it either, a really old look to not too distant past like the 1970s.
So it's similar to like the SteidlMACK app.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And I think the SteidlMACK only works with the iPhone and possibly the iPod Touch, but not with the iPad. But you can take and apply these flaws to give it that nostalgia. And I think one of the things that, people want to do is they want to take, not so great photos and apply it and then make it great, Yeah. You can take a great photo and apply it and it's still a great photo, but you also can take just junk photos that are out of focus that, really have, would be throwaway photos and apply these to them, and the people would look at it and go, "Oh man, that's cool."
Yeah, you're an artist because
yes.
Hey, I've done it too. This picture's kind of crappy, but let me throw in a fake light streak, and
yes.
and suddenly it's fine art.
The other thing with the Instagram that's really cool too that they just added, and it was with the new change to the OS, is the tilt shift. And I have some photos on my blog that I took and ran them through the Instagram and added the tilt shift feature, which instead of taking the depth of field from the foreground to the background, it actually has a vertical or a horizontal depth of field.
You can make that choice.
Yes.
Right.
And you can put it anywhere in the photo you want. You can intensify or decrease the blurriness, and it takes these photos and makes it look like you're like this building, like a 4-story building that you shot, looks like a toy building. It's actually really cool because people look at it and go, "Is that real?" And you don't have to go out and buy a $1,000 lens to do it.
Well, we're going to put a link to that little application on the podcast notes and include some of your sample pictures too to go along with it. But what if a person wants to take pictures like that? Let's say get a Holga effect, but they don't want to do it with post processing of any kind. They just want it to come out of the camera that way. Are there options for something like that?
Yeah, and I think the whole reason why I contacted you was because you were lamenting about having to find somebody to develop your 120 film.
Oh, I lament about so many things, Joseph. And I know I do it publicly, so.
Yeah.
So you came to my rescue.
Yes. I had seen on eBay that they, whenever I'm looking and I have an idea, I check eBay because, somebody could have done it, and if I don't have to reinvent the wheel, I won't. But there is a company out of Hong Kong that has on eBay the Holga lens that can fit to the Nikons and the Canons, and they only cost like $20 at the most, or at the comparable to $20 with free shipping. And I'm like, heck yeah, I'm going to do that. And so I ordered one. But when it comes from halfway across the world, it takes like a month to get here.
Well, it'd be neat to find somebody who had one.
Exactly.
Close by. Now this is an actual Holga lens. It's not just something that somebody slapped a name on. It appears that they actually pull lenses off of Holgas and then fit them with a mount.
Either that or they remanufactured them.
Ah, okay.
Because I looked at the mount, and the mount doesn't look like it's been glued. It looks like it was actually molded that way.
Oh, okay. Is it a plastic mount?
Yes. And you got to be careful because I almost broke it right after I took it out of the box.
Yeah.
I went to put the cap back on, and there are a few settings you can choose. The one person, the three people, or the group, or the mountain. And when you're on the one person, you unscrew it out. And I had left it that way. And when I went to put the cap back on, it jumped the threads, and I'm like, oh no.
Yeah.
So I had to, I got it back out, and then I turned it all the way to mountain setting, which pushes the lens all the way against the backing almost. And so when I did that, I put the cap back on. But yeah, it is plastic, and so it can break. But it is pretty cool. I didn't see the things I wanted to see right away with it. How you get the vignetting, kind of look to your images, and I think the reason is because with the 30D, it's not the full frame, right. But even with the 35 millimeter full frame, I didn't see it either. The 120 film is a much larger format than the 35 millimeter, and so when you have more film, that vignetting,
it's cropped out.
Exactly.
Yeah. But
it's still a pretty cool lens because you can slap it on there and you don't have to worry about the aperture. It's already set. The camera's not going to say, hey, you can just go out and start shooting. You could put it on, P for professional, and go out there and just take a bunch of pictures, and it's pretty cool. The one thing that, people talk about with flash is don't use your on-camera flash. Well, when you're indoors, you have to with the Holga lens because it's such a small aperture. And it actually gives a great look to it. It almost looks like you're taking pictures from like the 1980s when you had your 110 camera with the cube flash on top, and you turn it once that, cube flash went out. And so you get that look. But it's a fun little take it around and just take a bunch of shots. You don't have to worry about being professional. You don't have to worry about, making it look right. It's just fun to shoot.
Does it make a difference at all what your focus is set to when you're taking a shot with that?
Actually, it does. If you're going to do like landscape or something far away, you do choose the mountain. When you are trying to take pictures of people up close, it is best to put it all the way to that one person. So I did notice that because I was taking, I'm like, man, those are kind of fuzzy. I wonder if that's, and then I was like, oh yeah, I have to turn it. And so I turned it and like, oh, it actually does, it does somewhat focus when you do turn it.
Well, that's a big bonus though for using that on a digital camera, because what really annoys me is when I'm walking around taking pictures with my Holga and I'm taking scenery shots and I've got
you forget.
I forget, and it's like, oh, it's on the one guy.
Yes.
And that's not going to work.
Yes. Then you tell them, oh, I was going for that effect.
Yeah. It's sort of the ethereal, abstract effect that I was going for. Yeah, so that's some good tips, some good advice. Joseph, do you think you'd be able to join us again for another show sometime soon?
Sure, absolutely.
Great. Well, it was nice having you on to talk about this.
I appreciate this opportunity. As a photographer, you look for ways to be able to show your stuff, but when you talk about something you like, you learn it better because you're having to tell somebody how it's done. And it helps me personally.
Well, Joseph Ferreira, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to About Photography with Ed Verosky. Check out our website at aboutphotography.com. While you're there, don't forget to sign up for our free newsletter. Until next time, have a great day. Now go out and take some pictures.